Hands together for the gentleman I just gave the most awkward intro to ever. A good friend of mine, Mr. Joel Elliott.
Oh, yes, thank you, Matthew. And actually, not the most awkward intro I've had recently. Stephen Claybrooks, he started talking about cardboard boxes, and the homeless thing came up, and I just told him while he was introducing me, I never found a cardboard box. Like 62 days of homelessness, I never found a cardboard box. He's like, you're a terrible homeless person. I know, I'm living indoors now. I'm doing this all wrong. Miss Bucky, Tammy Bucky mentioned that she was divorced now because she wore the pants. The same thing with my wife. That's how I got to the streets. I was divorced, and yeah, she wears the pants, and she kept mine. She kept all my pants, which is funny because Tammy Bucky bought me these pants. That is absolutely true. That's not a joke. That's just true. She bought these pants. I want to do some topical stuff because I can't do all homeless comedy anymore. I'm not homeless technically, and Ebola is in the news. It's been in the news for a while. The people have been dying in Africa for quite some time. We're only now concerned because it's affecting us, because that's how we roll, roll tide. Yeah, America, right, with the apostrophe. That's where we are. That's where my spouse took me and then dropped me off on the street. I'm not from the South, I'm sorry. I'm still, every day I wake up and I'm like, I woke up in Alabama again. This is 370 consecutive days. But yeah, so Ebola is in the news, and when it hit Twitter, people were all mad. People were all like, oh, Obama's bringing Ebola to America. Thanks, Obama. It's a lot more nuanced than that, first of all. But second of all, maybe Obama had something in mind. Maybe he was finally going to address the unemployment problem. Maybe a good outbreak is all we need to thin the herd, and then we've all got jobs, Yeah, half of us have hemorrhagic fever, but the rest of us have jobs, I was excited about this, but then I checked the stats the other day. There's one case, one death from Ebola in America. It's just one, So I was like, thanks, Obama. You can't even get your own crazy unemployment plan right and get the Ebola thing going. But then I realized, I just recently got a job, and so thanks, Obama. You didn't have to get so personal, but that's great. I don't think the person before me died of Ebola, but I'm just gonna go ahead and go with that. The Ebola thing it's a thing, and on CNN, whenever there's something we're afraid of, the news stations can get ratings out of that, whether there's news about it or not. And CNN recently was kind of called out by this guy in the New Yorker. I want to read you this piece because it's great. They were discussing whether or not Ebola was the ISIS of biological agents. Okay, it said across the bottom of the screen, is Ebola the ISIS of biological agents? What does it matter? That's just all complete, just metaphor, whatever. You guys know what ISIS is. It's a terrorist group. No, Ebola isn't the ISIS of anything. It's just a disease. But, since CNN was just milking for ratings and being so ridiculous, this guy, Teju Cole, he wrote a piece in the New Yorker. I'm going to read that for you because it's hilarious. It's called What It Is. And it's referring to CNN asking whether Ebola was the ISIS of biological agents, okay? Here's the piece by Teju Cole from the New Yorker. It's great. Is Ebola the ISIS of biological agents? Is Ebola the Boko Haram of AIDS? Is Ebola the Al-Shabaab of dengue fever? Some say Ebola is the Milosevic of West Nile virus. Others say Ebola is the Ku Klux Klan of paper cuts. It's obvious that Ebola is the MH370 of MH17. But at some point, the question must be asked whether Ebola isn't also the Narendra Modi of sleeping sickness. And I don't mean to offend anyone's sensibilities, but there's more and more reason to believe that Ebola is the Sani Abacha of having some trouble peeing. At first, there was understandably the suspicion that Ebola was the Hitler of apartheid, but now it's become abundantly clear that Ebola is actually the George W. Bush of being forced to listen to someone's podcast. Yes! Folks, this thing is serious. The World Health Organization calls it the Putin of Stalin. In layperson's terms, that's like saying it's the Stalin of U2. Now we're seeing the idea thrown around that it could be the Black Hand of the Black Death, not to mention the Red Peril of the Red Plague. If you don't want to go that far, you have to at least admit that Ebola is the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb of stage 4 brain cancer. At this point, it's very possible that Ebola could become airborne and turn into the Tea Party of extreme climate events. Throughout the country of Africa, Ebola is the Abu Ghraib of think pieces. Look, I'm not the politically correct type, so I'm just going to put this out there. Ebola is the neo-Nazism of niggling knee injuries. The kind of threat it poses to the American way of life essentially makes it the North Korea of peanut allergies. I'm not going to lie to you, and I don't care what color you are. You can be red, green, blue, purple, whatever. You need to understand that Ebola, the Obama of Osama, but don't quote me, is literally the some of my best friends are black of hashtag not all men. But the burning question no one has raised yet is whether Ebola is the Newsweek of halitosis. We'll go to the phones in a moment and get your take on this, but first let me open the discussion up to our panel and ask whether Ebola is merely the Fox News of explosive incontinence, or whether the situation is much, much worse than that, and Ebola is, in fact, the CNN of CNN. What It Is by Teju Cole. That was in the New Yorker. It was a wonderful piece. Okay, so I've been doing comedy for about 6 months, and people, when even doing comedy, stand up, being on stage, it's an amazing thing, but we've been to space. We've got NASA around here, which is neat. That's one thing that's neat about Huntsville. And, we've been to space. Being in space is an amazing thing, but once we got, bored with it, all the footage now is of just people floating in a spaceship eating Jell-O, or, it's just hey, look, stuff floats up here. That's what we keep turning back to. And I'm in that stage of things where it's I've been up here so much that, I want to start getting experimental. I want to start, watching Jell-O float while I'm on stage. So we're going to do something different. I've always wondered if opera would be better with a hype man. There's a talking guy in the Boyz II Men, music, and other bands do that. A guy comes on with a Quiet Storm voice, and so we're gonna try that tonight. Luke Scott, host of the open mic on Thursday nights downtown at 8 p.m. Luke, come up here and be my hype man. You can do a sexy voice, can't you? Luke's got a sexy voice all the time, but he's gonna do a Quiet Storm voice. First, let's practice that out. Quiet Storm, you know what I mean by that? Damn girl, give me one of those. Damn girl. Okay, that's good. I'm gonna hand you the hype man stuff as we go, and then you're gonna be the hype man for this opera. Okay. Undi felice eterna. Damn girl. Mi ballanaste nante. You know what I'm talking about. Aida caldi tremante, vici d'agnoto amor di che amor. Yeah. Che l'amor che palpito dell'universo. Damn. Dell'universo intero, misterioso, misterioso altera, croce delizia, delizia al core. When I look at you, I'm filled with pain and delight. The universe is mysterious on this eternal happy day. Delizia, delizia al core, delizia, delizia al core, croce delizia, delizia al core. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for operatic hype man Luke Scott. Come out to his open mic. Look for it on the bass floor. Croce delizia al core. So yeah, floating around in space eating Jell-O. That's what that was. Right there, because I started getting bored. God bless you guys. You guys have been great tonight. My God. You've been great for 6 months now. Okay, 2 months of it I was in jail, but for the rest of it, you guys have been great. It's amazing being in the comedy scene in Huntsville. I always know that I have a home here on stage performing for you fine people. So thank you again. Huntsville, I do love you. I'm gonna go back to the apartment that I'm crashing in now and masturbate and cry and take a shower. Probably in that order. There's gonna be some overlap. But yeah, thank you.
Joel Elliott, everybody!